You know that feeling where everyone around you seems like they just know something you don't? Like there was some announcement, some meeting, some moment where everyone got handed their next step and their direction and their reason to feel confident about where they're going, and you just weren't there for it. People you grew up with have plans, real ones, career paths, acceptance letters, cars, relationships that look stable, apartments that look lived in a good way. And you're sitting there with a bunch of question marks and a browser full of tabs you opened and never actually read. And the frustrating part isn't even not having those things. The frustrating part is not knowing why. You're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're actually trying. So why does it feel like everyone is running a race that you didn't get to start at the same time as everyone else? I want to talk about that today, because I think the reason you feel behind is not what you think it is. And once you actually understand where the feeling comes from, it loses a lot of its power over you. I'll tell you what it looked like for me. For a long time, I was watching people around me hit things I hadn't hit yet. It wasn't always big stuff. Sometimes it was small things, the kind that shouldn't matter, but somehow do. And instead of those small things feeling small, they just stacked. Each one added quietly to this running total in my brain that said, "You're behind." And it bleeds. That's the thing nobody tells you about this feeling. It doesn't stay in one place. It gets into everything. You see someone from school post something on social media and your brain immediately starts comparing. Not intentionally, just automatically, like a reflex. And then you close the app and go back to whatever you were doing, and there's just this low-level weight sitting in your chest that you can't quite name. I also spent a period of time doing things not because I actually wanted to do them, but because someone around me was doing them and it seemed to be working. I thought if I just do what they're doing, maybe the same thing happens for me. It didn't, because it was never mine to begin with. And I wasn't doing it because I cared about it, I was doing it because I was panicking. And panic is not a strategy. The worst part wasn't even failing at the thing. The worst part was watching the person I was copying succeed while I was falling further behind doing a version of their thing that didn't fit me at all. That's a specific kind of awful. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain is a comparison machine. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. It evolved that way. Humans are social animals, and we've always measured ourselves against the people around us. It's how we figured out where we stood, what we needed, what direction to move in. The problem is the environment we're operating in now is completely different from what that system was designed for. For most of human history, you compared yourself to maybe a few dozen people at most, people in your immediate world, people whose full lives you actually had context for. You knew what they struggled with, you knew what they sacrificed, you saw the whole picture, not just the highlight. Now you have a device in your pocket that shows you a curated version of hundreds or thousands of people's best moments, all day, every day, in real time. Someone just got accepted somewhere, someone just moved, someone just launched something, someone your age just got featured somewhere. And your brain, running the same comparison software it's always run, takes all of that in and starts drawing conclusions. He's got that, so I should too. She did that at this age, so I'm behind. But it's not a fair comparison. It never was. You're comparing your whole internal experience, every doubt, every slow day, every uncertain moment, against someone else's filtered external presentation of their wins. That gap is never going to close, not because you're behind, but because the comparison itself is broken. And then there's the timeline, which nobody made, nobody signed off on, and somehow everybody is following. You know the one. By this age, you should have your license. By that age, you should have a job. By your early 20s, you should have a plan, an apartment, something that looks like a direction. By your mid-20s, things should be clicking into place. By 30, it should all make sense. Whoever wrote that timeline has never met a real person. Here's how this timeline actually gets built. You watch the people around you. You see when they hit things, and your brain quietly turns those observations into rules. He got his at this age, she had that figured out by then. And suddenly you have this internal checklist that you didn't consciously create and can't quite articulate, but you're failing it anyway. The problem is, the people you're building the timeline from are not a representative sample. Some of them had advantages you didn't. Some of them had support systems, financial situations, or circumstances that made those timelines easier to hit. Some of them hit the thing and it still didn't feel like you thought it would feel from the outside. And some of them, the ones who looked the most confident about where they were going, you'd be surprised how many of them were just saying something that sounded good because they were scared too. You see the announcement, you don't see what's behind it.
I want to go back to the copying thing for a second, because I think it's one of the most common things people do when they feel behind and one of the least talked about. When you see someone around you succeeding at something, really winning at it, and you're already in that headspace where you feel like you're falling short, the temptation is immediate. You think, if I just do what they're doing, I'll get what they're getting. So you pivot. You do their thing. You abandon whatever you were building, even if it wasn't done yet, and you start doing the version of their path that you can see from the outside. And it doesn't work. Not because you're not capable, but because you're doing something that was never yours in the first place. You don't have their context. You don't have their specific timing, their specific strengths, or the specific sequence of things that led them to that point. You just have the visible output, and you're trying to reverse engineer success from a result without understanding the actual inputs. And here's the really painful part. You fail at it, you feel worse than before, and now your brain has new evidence that you're behind. You didn't just fail to catch up, you actively lost time and ground in the process. What that time should have been spent on is the thing that's actually yours, the thing you don't have to force yourself to care about, the thing that when you're working on it doesn't feel like performing someone else's life. That's where the actual progress lives, not in doing their thing better, in doing your thing more.
I'm not going to tell you to just stop comparing yourself to other people. That advice is useless. Your brain does it automatically, and telling it to stop is like telling yourself not to think about something. You're just going to think about it more. What you can do is interrupt the pattern, not stop it, interrupt it. When you catch yourself in a comparison spiral, looking at someone else's life and running the math on how you measure up, instead of trying to shut it down, redirect the question. Don't ask, why do they have that and I don't? Ask, what specifically do I want and what's one thing I can do about it today? That's not toxic positivity, it's just a more useful question. Because the first one has no productive answer, it just feeds the spiral. The second one has a direction in it. And the other thing, and this is harder, is to stop measuring your progress against other people's timelines and start measuring it against your own previous points. Where were you 6 months ago, a year ago? What do you understand now that you didn't then? What have you built slowly, even imperfectly? That comparison is actually fair, because it's you against you. Same circumstances, same starting point, same context. And usually when you do that honestly, you find that you've moved more than the comparison to other people was letting you see. You're not behind. You're just looking at the wrong scoreboard.
The feeling of being behind is one of the most common feelings people your age have, and also one of the least talked about out loud, because you don't want to say it. Saying it feels like admitting something, like you'll look insecure or jealous or small. So people carry it quietly, and because everyone's carrying it quietly, everyone assumes they're the only one feeling it, which makes it worse. There are people in your life right now who feel exactly what you feel. The friend who looks like they have a plan, the person who posts the confident updates, they have a version of this running in the background too, at a different volume, about different things, but it's there. You are not uniquely behind. You're human in a world that is very good at making you feel like everyone else got a head start. Take that for what it's worth. And if this video gave you something, drop it in the comments. I actually read them, and I'll see you in the next one.